That alone, verse number 41. So this verse is about the what of this, and the what of that, this. Verse number 41. This is a pot, in that what comes first, this, is the difficult to discern. Pot is its qualifying predicate. For intellect and such Mahendra magic to manifest, this itself becomes the karu. Thus one should see. Commentary. This is apparently a very simple verse, but it summarizes the whole process of semiosis in a few words. Semiosis is the process of consciousness transforming itself into specific ideas so that it can become a communicable language. Even though we are all living in the same world, and in some cases are even part of the same society, life is presented to each of us differently. From each person's standpoint, we see certain things as important and do not notice some other things at all, which may be very important to someone else. Like the great Creator who is said to have created this world, each one of us is continuously in the process of creating our own world. This creation always begins by specifying our consciousness so that we can start from one point and then develop it further. The first step is consciousness presenting itself a question such as, what is this? Who is this? Why is this? Or how is this? The question occasions a search, which is imperative because of the lack of clarity. The mind is asking for certitude, for clarity. And what is not clear? This is not clear. What is immediately presented to the mind is not clear. When you qualify this, it becomes clear. In the question, what is this? There are two aspects. One is the thisness, the other the what. What is the qualification of this? When you say this is a pot, this is qualified with the specific features of a pot. Now we know what this is. It has become clear. The mind doesn't stop there. It will present another this. So another question comes, what is that sound? If we don't answer the question, the mind won't be satisfied. So we think, it's a child crying. Then it's okay. The mind goes on continuously presenting this. When it is presented, it is vague. We want an explanation of it. Then the mind gives the explanation. For the mind to explain a phenomenon, a this, it has to summon previous memories which have qualities that resemble the new experience. We also use our senses as instruments to search out more about the qualities that can be attributed to the present situation in order to clarify it further. All this belongs to what we call semiosis. It has 3 or 4 stages of development. One is intrinsically connected with our basic urges and interests. It reveals itself only at the termination of each unit of experience. In semantics, this is called pragmatics. Every bit of information which the mind gathers is to fulfill a certain need. The need can be biological, psychological, physiological, logical, mathematical, or social. The fulfillment of the need comes only through the process that triggers the interest to turn the mind in a certain direction and give it its powers of maneuvering. We are not at all clear about the level where pragmatics meets consciousness because it comes from the depth of our unconscious. In Indian psychology, this is called vasana, the incipient memories or latent urges lying buried in the unconscious. Once the seed of a certain interest starts to germinate, it presents itself at the threshold of consciousness. Like a bell, it calls you to attention. You recognize that calling of attention as this. Then the question comes, what is this? Your ideas are subtle, and those ideas are prefabricated concepts. If you are working in a library and are asked to find a certain book, you can look it up in a catalogue, which will give you a number corresponding to a shelf in a certain section of a certain room. Like that, our mind uses a kind of cataloguing. Information tags are attached to all the mind's nomenclature. For anything which is presented outside, there has to be a corresponding illumination within. You bring that from inside and see if it squares with the data that is presented by the senses. If there is a one-to-one correspondence, then you identify what is presented to you with the pratibha or corresponding concept. They become riveted together. Afterwards, there is no separation of what has come from inside you and what is presented outside. In your mind, it is a continuous whole, so much so that you do not even recognize that the psychic aspect and the physical aspect have now become integrated. So from pragmatics, you go on to what is called logistics. Logistics makes your ideation structurally meaningful. For instance, the subject and its predicate have to be related in a certain way so that your predication of the subject makes sense to you. Then, if you want to communicate something to another person, you decide how you are going to express it. This is called the syntax. Only with all three of these aspects, pragmatics, logistics, and syntactics, is the process of semiosis complete, even in such a simple statement as this is a pot. Now let's go back to the very first verse in which the Guru said, Arivelum eri, transcending or entering into the texture of knowledge. The term implies both transcendence and immanence. He says that withdrawing your senses and having surrendered your ego in an act of devotion, you should prostrate again and again to the Karu. Karu is that substance or that reality or that yoke, that causal factor from which this cosmos and its psychological counterpart have both emanated. Instead of describing it theologically as God, we are making a philosophical appraisal. The idea of the supreme cause is an adorable concept of the Absolute. We are asked to show our appreciation to this concept by inclining before it with an attitude of reverence, prostrating our egos again and again. This refers to the cosmological level. On the everyday phenomenal level, the same appears to us as our daily life in a million forms, always beginning with the simple question, what is this? The questioning aspect of the mind is followed by the summoning of memory. Memory brings an appropriate concept to the surface, which is then linked with the presented subject. Then you make a judgment of predication. After the predication, you become affected. Thus the four limbs of the mind, interrogation, recall, judgment, and value appreciation, all line up. Only when a value appreciation finally emerges at the end of this process are the pragmatics presented. Although this ultimately is the cause which makes your mind go through the whole process, it comes only at the end. When a potter intends to make a pot, the pot is in the future. He has not yet made it, but the possibility of the future pot impels him to act towards it, so that as the final realization, he can accomplish the pot. The abhava, the absence of a thing, is presented in our mind as a possibility, which is taking us from the future to the present. Usually we think that we are moving from the past through the present to the future, but it doesn't happen that way. The future is dynamic. It makes you move from a possibility to an actualization. That which is actualized thereafter remains frozen as an eternal event, an accomplished fact. If you can see that this whole process is happening to you moment after moment, day after day, you will understand your inside and outside a little more clearly. This verse shows it to be such a simple thing. In this is a pot, this is the indiscernible. Pot is the qualifying aspect. You are participating in the creation of the entire world. My world has its own quality, and your world has another quality. My world is full of a transcendental analytic, while Nijinsky's and Van Gogh's is filled with a transcendental aesthetic, and Thoreau's and Whitman's poetics, to say nothing of the rishis and all the great works of the rest of the globe. For you, it is likely to be another world. For a doctor, the world is patience and redressing pain and bringing them to their normal state of health. For others, it is the world of business and economics. So many things emerge from nowhere and become the facts of our individual value systems. One thing that is hard for most people to understand is the concreteness they create out of a subtle mind. For instance, a typewriter sitting there is a concrete fact. If you lift it, it is heavy. When you touch it, it is hard. When you operate it, it functions. You can create a desired effect by working on it. It is a concrete fact, but the concreteness, the sense of weight and hardness and so on, are all experienced in your consciousness. It is not only concrete for you, it is concrete for me too. Thus, it is a concreteness we can share, called the universal concrete. The universal concrete is a participatory function of all minds. Because of the mind's homogeneity, we fully agree in a transactional sense. The universal concreteness we jointly create gives transactional validity to our world. In wakeful consciousness, where two people cooperate in a situation, they are dealing with the universal concrete, unaware that the psychic aspect and the physical aspect are amalgamated in their knowledge through the process of semiosis. Philosophers have written pages and pages elucidating this idea. Narayana Guru has expressed the whole thing in the first half of a small verse. This is a pot, in that this is the obdurate. Pot is its qualifying aspect. Putting them together, you get the idea of a concrete pot. That is a universal concrete. Once you hit upon a universal concrete, you have not only made a present, you have also made a past, because that experience will remain with you for the rest of your life as a recorded event. It is frozen and kept forever. Thus the whole of the past is generated at this very moment by the promises and potentialities of the future. Is it not a great miracle? Is it not happening like a great magician's magic? You are the magician. You doesn't mean your ego. Your poor ego is only one of the tools used by this marvelous magician who is sitting inside you. The same magician is in an ant, a fly, a bee, a bird, in an idiot as well as a genius, continuously making things manifest. In the next verse, the Guru is going to ask us to turn to that thisness with more clarity. It is adorable, a wonder within you. In this type of understanding, you become more intimate with your God than when you relate to Him in the situation of a church, where you are analogically putting Him outside you as a foreign entity. Here it's you, the very process that is going on within you from moment to moment. You can never get nearer or closer than this to the very Creator, because the process of creation is going on here and now in what you call your mind, your intellect, your understanding, and your affectivity. And the free translation of verse 41 is, when one says this is a pot, what comes first as this is difficult to discern, while pot is its qualifying attribute. When the endless sense-oriented cogitations proliferate, one should bear in mind that the indicative pronoun this is the fountainhead.